I'm a member of a networking group that's only open to women. Is that kind of reverse discrimination? Is that helpful? Are we moving on by doing that? In fact, one of our competitors has an awards for women who've managed to hold down jobs in media. Well done, women. Do you think that kind of thing, you know, a separate but different, are you kind of different but equal? I mean, is there any merit in that at all?
Look, I think it's really interesting when you talk about a women's only networking group. If you look like, you know, surprise, surprise, my mother was a big feminist back in the 70s. You know, when there was the women's consciousness raising groups, and my dad went along to one once and then no men were allowed again. That's not a reflection of him. But, you know, that was incredibly powerful. That was such a time of incredible change. And women really needed that space to be able to explore these issues and their power and their potential without men in the room. And that was really, really important and significant. And obviously we have come a long way since then. But I do think that there's power in women creating those sorts of networks, because hey, men do, and they have been forever.
There's certainly power in women mentoring other women.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of women who just have closed the door. As they've gone through that trap door, they've closed it. And
Yeah.
I think that's an attitude that needs to be addressed.
Why do you think that is?
Threatening. I think some women like to just be in that space with all blokes, and I don't think they like to have other women in that area with them for whatever reason. Like, I mean, yeah, I've seen that trapdoor shut on many occasions.
And I think that I think absolutely there are great programs out there, the mentoring programs for women, and you know, lots of women need, and it's really valuable. As long as I think that there's a balance also of having, you know, a male-female mentoring program, because and do the guys get an opportunity to have male mentors? You know, that you can't forget about the guys. You know, like.
I don't think there's any danger of the men
you know,
being
like,
left behind.
You know, I hear a lot about, you know, I think that female mentoring programs are so essential, and I think it's wonderful. I just, you know, I think that there should be, I have a female mentor, you know, but there needs...
I have a male mentor.
There just needs to be that balance, and I think we can't harp on too much about, you know, there's just that avenue of, if you want to mentor, you can go on a female mentoring program. You should, you know...
Because we would run short, I think, of mentors, possibly.
Yeah.
True.
So, Ian,
but I think a lot of male mentoring happens informally, you know, at the pub, at the footy game, you know, in a different sort of way. And I think, you know, a lot of more senior women, they've got family commitments, they're heading home, they're not going to the pub with their junior staff and filling that position.
Ian, do you have a view on this?
I think in an ideal world, I'd agree with you that that's almost reverse discrimination, but the problem is, and that we've all highlighted, is that we aren't in an ideal world. And so I think that's actually should be encouraged as a way to try and change the status quo, because obviously the status quo is the problem. So I think that should be encouraged and developed, and people should, you know, do whatever they can in order to try and make sure we get to a better place.
So how does that work kind of institutionally? How do you, I mean, is there, for example, we were talking about succession planning for, you know, male CEOs hiring a female kind of replacement for themselves. Is that a ludicrous thought?
I don't think too many people or too many CEOs, certainly I'm not thinking of succession planning, and in the green room before we came on, everyone was looking at me saying, have you got a succession plan? And I've just started my job, so no, I don't have one, but I probably do need one. And I think, yes, there should be a broader view within the organisation of how you are doing these things. You know, how are you developing your talent? What is the structure of your business? Who is going to be leading it? I'd be more excited, to be honest, rather than creating a succession plan for a woman to take over my role. I'd love for us to evolve our corporate structure to a point whereby there were 3 partners who ran the business, not just one person. And I've previously worked in an environment where that happened, and we had 3 managing partners and all had totally different skills. And that worked incredibly well for the business, because you've got multifaceted questions coming in from clients all of the time. Some people are better at commercial related issues, other people are better at dealing with clients, other people are more creative. So to expect one person to be you know, the leader of all of that is actually a little bit antiquated as far as I'm concerned. So in terms of if we're talking legacy for when I get fired or resign, I'd prefer that legacy to be a new corporate organisational structure that fits the sort of company that we are. And we are talking about, not to plug our agency too much, but being an open agency. So if we're going to be true to that as a philosophy, then the management structure and the leadership structure should reflect that philosophy.
What about things like training programs? If it's kind of anecdotally an issue for women in things like negotiating salaries, like the kind of stats indicate that women don't bargain as hard as their male counterparts. Do you think that simple kind of skill, training for things like that would be a start, a basic start? Anyone?
Sorry, can I reframe the question and ask the people in the panel whether they think that's because women don't argue as hard or bargain as hard, or do you think that's because they are negotiating invariably with a man who's going to give another man a better salary?
A combination of the two, isn't it? To some degree.
And I mean, for me, part of it, what it comes down to is, it's going to sound a bit strange, but money isn't my biggest concern in terms of my work satisfaction. It's not the most important thing to me. So, I personally, I've never asked for a pay rise. I get the indexed increase each year, but it's not my biggest priority. I'd be much more interested in talking about flexibility, additional leave. It's just not my priority. And that's not to say that that's the same for all women. I'm not the main breadwinner in my relationship, so that it gives me a lot more flexibility for money not to be my biggest priority. But having said that, there is obviously a big problem with women asking for pay rises, and maybe my attitude that it's not my biggest priority comes down to a lot of conditioning around what women should be entitled to expect.
I think women are sometimes our own worst enemies, in the way that we perceive our capabilities. And it's just interesting, the other day I got a call about quite a high-end job, and my immediate reaction was, could I do that? Whereas I know that a bloke would say, yeah, I could do that. Yeah, I'll just jump into it and I will keep swimming. I mean, I know I could do that. So sometimes I think we have to blame ourselves for not going in there and fighting harder for a pay rise or fighting harder for a job, because I think we've been conditioned to believe we're probably, in our own ways, not competent's the wrong word, because I think we are very competent, but we're probably not as gung-ho as blokes are. Blokes are very much, no matter what the job is, they'll be able to do it, even if they can't.
I disagree with that. I think men have exactly the same insecurities around whether they can do something. I just think they've got more bravado,
they're more
better, okay, wow, I'm going to have a crack at it. I think that, and probably part of this issue deals, and I'm not going to go into the psychology of it all, with male insecurity. So I'd say that it's just as prevalent within men. But they've got a different reaction mechanism to those insecurities.
Completely. But that also goes to the way we negotiate pay rises, the way we negotiate conditions, all the rest of it. I think men are very much better at doing that than women, whether it's bravado or not.
And where does that start, the bravado? Does it start, is it your first job, or is it something that we kind of are training ourselves to do from the minute we get our first Tonka truck as a little boy or a Barbie as a little girl? Like, where does it start? And how can women get some?
I mean, obviously that's a complicated question. I think there's a fair bit of societal pressure that goes into the way we react as human beings, and you've hit the nail on the head. When kids arrive, and I remember when our kids first started growing up, my son loved playing soccer and playing with his toys, and it wasn't because we pushed him that way. That's what he enjoyed doing. My daughter, on the other hand, hated soccer balls and all of that stuff and loves her Barbie dolls. And I think the last thing we want to do is say, well, everyone should be exactly the same, because that's absolutely ridiculous. Men have certain ways of thinking and acting and doing things, and I think we should encourage that and embrace that. But similarly, so do women, and we should encourage and embrace that as well. And the fact that we're different is fantastic. But I think what's happening is we're embracing too much of the male side and not enough of the female side.